Joining me now, we have Senator Tina Smith of Minnesota. Awfully good to see you again, ma'am. Thank you so much for joining me. So, first, let's go to Donald Trump's Madison Square Garden event later on today. Do you think he has any clue that it echoes the so-called pro-American neo-Nazi rally from 1939? And how does that contrast with Harris's campaign stops today, the retail politics? She's been at a barbershop, a bookstore, a restaurant. She's now at a basketball arena.
Yeah, thank you, Alex. It's so good to be with you. It's impossible for me to believe that Donald Trump and his campaign aren't aware of the echoes of his appearance at Madison Square Garden to that Nazi rally all those years ago. And in fact, we even saw pictures of him wearing some of the same colors as the Proud Boys supporters, which he cultivates. So, of course, they are aware of this. And, you know, at the same time, this Madison Square Garden appearance looks to me like sort of this giant ego trip. I mean, every day Donald Trump shows us who he is, and we need to believe him when he shows us. And then in comparison, you have Vice President Harris, who is out talking to people, showing people in her way who she is, what she cares about, who she's listening to, connecting with people and showing people that she gets their lives. I think as we move into the final days of this campaign, people are looking and thinking about how do they afford their lives? How do they keep control of their own health care, including abortion? That this contrast just could not be more clear today.
And then add to that, former First Lady Michelle Obama, who made her first appearance on the campaign trail for Kamala Harris yesterday and made her visceral case, particularly to men, why they should care that Donald Trump would be a danger to women's health. Let's take a look at that.
If your wife is shivering and bleeding on the operating room table during a routine delivery gone bad, her pressure dropping as she loses more and more blood, or some unforeseen infection spreads and her doctors aren't sure if they can act, you will be the one praying that it's not too late. You will be the one pleading for somebody, anybody, to do something.
Chilling there. And you were a former Democratic strategist. How effective is this message and the former First Lady as the messenger?
Yeah, well, what she did that was so powerful. I used to work at Planned Parenthood, and I saw every day people walk through the doors of our clinic, and that wasn't a political act for them. It was a personal act. It was a private decision that they're making about their own lives. And what Michelle did so powerfully is she said, speaking directly to men in some cases, put aside the politics. This isn't a political disagreement. This is whether the women that you love are going to be able to get the health care that they need, in some cases, to save their lives. I think that taking it out of the political context and putting it squarely in that personal frame is very impactful and really, I think, gets at the issues and why so many people find this issue of reproductive freedom so powerful and such a mobilizing issue as they decide who they want to be in the White House. Because there's, again, a huge difference here in terms of what Donald Trump will do and what Kamala Harris will do.
Sage point you make there, though. It is not a political decision when a woman is going into a clinic to have reproductive health care services like that. It is personal. And Donald Trump has repeated his threats against political adversaries in these final days of the election. He has singled out your Capitol Hill colleagues, California Representative Adam Schiff, also former House Speaker Nancy Pelosi, as examples of who he considers to be the enemy within. Friday, he told podcaster Joe Rogan that the enemy within posed a bigger threat to the nation than North Korean leader Kim Jong-un. How do you interpret all that?
Well, again, here he is telling us who he is, what he plans to do. And this language of the enemy within is old language. It connects directly to the old days of McCarthy, where we had political leaders who were trying to get us to turn against ourselves. And when Donald Trump says that he is going to use the power of the government to prosecute his political enemies, I think that we should believe him. It was stunning to me, again, to listen to his running mate, J.D. Vance, today, basically try to gaslight us all into believing that none of that is really real, and that's not really what he was saying. I think, again, let's pay attention to what the man is saying, and we should take it seriously and hold him accountable for it.
Let's talk about the battle for the Senate. We have the Cook Political Report, which says 9 competitive races could determine the balance of power, 4 of which they describe as toss-ups at this point. In your neighboring state of Wisconsin, two-term incumbent Senator Tammy Baldwin is now neck and neck with Republican Eric Hovde. Then in Pennsylvania, Senator Bob Casey's lead over Republican Dave McCormick, that's shrinking. Ohio, we see Senator Sherrod Brown trying to hold off former car dealer Bernie Moreno. What are you hearing about Democrats overcoming these challenges?
Yeah, well, so I have been working as helping to lead the Democratic Senatorial Campaign Committee, and we have known all along that these races in the battleground seats were going to be so close. And of course, that's exactly where we are. As we head into the final days of this campaign, we have a couple of key advantages that I believe are going to cause us to be victorious at the end. One is that we have very strong candidates who have run and won in their states, running against people like Eric Hovde or McCormick in Pennsylvania, who in some cases barely even live in their states. But then the third advantage that we have is this just tremendous on the ground momentum. Thousands and thousands and thousands of volunteers that are turning out. I've campaigned in Wisconsin. I'm going to go back again before the end of before Election Day. And you see that on the ground. And that makes a difference in these very close races where who turns out to vote, who feels that, yes, I am going to vote, my voice is powerful, I'm going to use it, makes the difference in these races that will be decided by, a few thousand people in some cases.
Thank you for Hovde, by the way. I know I said it, mispronounced it that first time. But Democrats are also hoping for a blue miracle in Texas, where Democrat Colin Allred, he is catching up to Senator Ted Cruz. What is it going to take for Allred to win?
Well, Colin Allred is, again, a great candidate. He is connecting with people all over the state. And Ted Cruz barely won when he last ran. He is universally disliked, nearly, in Texas. And so I think there's a great hope that Colin is going to be able to pull it out. I would just note that when the vice president went to Texas a couple of days ago, she was really drawing attention again to the issue of reproductive freedom, a very important issue in the Senate race, as Colin is saying strongly and firmly, I believe that you ought to have the right to make your own decisions about your health care, including abortion. And Ted Cruz is on a completely different page. And that is not where most Texas voters are. So I think almost anything could happen in Texas, but I think there's a real chance there.
Well, I'm glad to say we, Senator Tina Smith of Minnesota, are on the same page. So thank you so much for joining me. It's good to see you.